You know, every day, those of us who have computers, we get stuff on our computer through emails telling us we won millions of dollars. We get phone calls at home telling us, in one case in Lincoln, where an individual found out his grandson supposedly was arrested in Canada. He ended up spending money and sending it to Canada, only to find out his grandson was not arrested. It was a scam. There's a lot of scams going on trying to get your money. And I thought, I listened to Melissa give a speech one time on fraud, dealing with seniors and the problems that we're encountering in today's society. And I really felt that this would be a good presentation for everyone here to see. Melissa.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'd like to introduce Melissa Bales. She's an assistant county attorney in the county attorney's office. I'm the deputy county attorney, but only until Friday. I'm actually leaving and going into private practice for myself, so you guys are my last senior senator that I get to speak with, and I'm very happy. I want to tell you a little bit about me. So 4 years ago, I joined a team that was made up of people across the state, and we went around the state training law enforcement in how to investigate crimes of elder abuse, which almost always have some kind of money missing. And Melissa has not been part of that team, but Melissa's nice thing is she's brand spanking new as a prosecutor. You've got 2 years in of experience, yep. And one of the things about Melissa is that she's always looking for what can we do next to make things better. And so that's why she's here. And she also handles all of the felony crimes that happen around here in the Lincoln and Woodstock area. So she's kind of the go-to person for all of you. To tell you a little bit about how we're going to do this, as you might have noticed, there's some cameras. The students from Lin-Wood are here to do some recording. If you have questions to the presentation, don't hesitate to stop and ask. Melissa's going to keep track of the questions. We'll do those all at the end to try to answer them as best we can, but we want to try to get the presentation done for the students because it's going to go on to the cable channel at some point. So with that being said, here's our phone number for our office. All of the attorneys in our office have some training in elder abuse crimes. And we're all very proactive on that because we know it's something that affects our community every single day. And I wanted to say a special thank you to an officer way down south in Canaan, New Hampshire, Sergeant Porter. He's been very involved in trying to get all law enforcement in his area trained in this, and he's actually got a couple of big cases. He's the one that put together most of the slide presentation. He couldn't be here today, but I wanted to give him, some credit for what he did. So this is basically what we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk about why seniors, like all of you, are targeted, because you are targeted by thieves. We're going to talk about the different kinds of financial scams that we've seen right here in Grafton County, and we'll talk about some of the real cases that have been prosecuted by the county attorney's office as well, just so you get an understanding of how these crimes kind of play out. Because it's very easy to talk about an internet scam, but we're going to tell you what they look like when they actually happen. We'll talk about some tips to keep your money safe, and we'll talk about how to protect yourself and others that you may know, whether they be friends, your husband, your wife, your brother, your sister, everyone. And I'm going to use the term elder abuse constantly throughout this, and a lot of times when people hear the word abuse, they think about like child abuse, the little kid with the black eye. Well, elder abuse is actually a broader term. It doesn't just mean physical abuse. It can mean neglect, and it can mean financial exploitation or theft. So when you hear that, don't automatically think, well, I'm not elder abuse, nobody's hitting me. We're talking about a broader range than that. And the scams we'll talk about include identity theft, telemarketing cons, stealing Social Security checks from mailboxes, fraud by unscrupulous contractors and professional advisors. So as much as the kind of stranger thieves target all of you, one important thing that we'd like you to remember is that, and this is bearing true not only nationally, but what we're seeing in our office, is that about 75% of the time that an elder has experienced theft, whether it be identity theft or money theft, it's been somebody close to them, somebody in their family, somebody that's a friend of theirs, a pastor, a work relation. So just keep that in mind too, that as much as we talk about these strangers that are targeting seniors, people that are close to seniors also target them. So this is an example of the kind of closeness we talk about. So imagine that there's an older woman whose family kind of has moved on and they're raising their kids and they really don't have as much time to spend as they might want to. And so there's this younger woman who comes into town who befriends her. And suddenly this new friend is taking her shopping, to the doctor, to church, all those things that her family can't do for her, giving her companionship and help when she needs it. But pretty soon the friend is helping herself to jewelry, collectibles, maybe even the woman's Social Security checks. And before anybody in the family has noticed what's happened, the woman has been talking to signing the deed of her house over to this new friend that has become very close to her. I would like to tell you that that's something we completely made up. It's not. We've seen this more than I would like to admit. And up until very recently, there's actually a bill pending right now with the Senate that if it passes the Senate, it'll be going to the governor, will make it easier for us to prosecute those kind of crimes, but it doesn't exist right now. And it's made some of the prosecution of holding these people accountable very difficult. Some other examples of financial exploitation is using your personal information to establish a line of credit and then not paying for that credit card bill. You'll see what happened in Canaan with a woman who ended up having over 40 different accounts opened in her name, and she didn't know about it at all. Cashing an older person's check without permission, forging somebody's signature, misusing or stealing their money and possessions, and deceiving a victim into signing a contract, a power of attorney, a deed, any of those kinds of important documents. So why are you all targeted? There's lots of reasons. You guys are the perfect people for con artists who don't feel like earning their own keep. First of all, a lot of you have a nest egg of some kind. Maybe you own your own home. Maybe you have a retirement account. For those thieves, they're looking at that pile of money as something that they can take. Younger folks generally don't have those benefits financially. That's why you're a target and younger people may not. You also have excellent credit because you've been paying your bills on time. You've been managing your wealth properly. Again, young people don't have that established. That makes you a great target. And Americans over the age of 65 control $15 trillion worth of assets in this country. And they lose $2.6 billion to financial abuse every year. It's a huge problem, and it just keeps growing, unfortunately. And there is a generational difference. Those of us who were born in Generation X, we were the ones that plugged in our Walkman headphones and tuned out from the rest of the world. But you guys were raised to be polite and courteous, and you might not want to start trouble in a way that younger people maybe not. And they try to exploit all of these traits. Knowing it's difficult for you to just hang up the phone. Anybody get those telemarketing calls where you just hang up the phone? I don't even let them get the word hello out and I'm hanging up the phone. My mother-in-law will always at least find out who they are and what they want. And I keep telling her, just hang up the phone. Anyway, they are counting on all of the seniors to not report. Crimes against senior citizens are probably the most underreported crime that we see. Even more underreported than cases of child abuse or domestic violence. And there are 4 very specific reasons that seniors don't tend to report. Number 1, maybe you don't know how to report a crime. You don't want to bother the police with all of this. We're going to talk about that in a little bit and show you that the police want you to bother them and tell them about this. You're a victim of a crime. You have rights. You might be too ashamed or embarrassed to talk about it. Because how could this happen to me? Look at me. I've worked my whole life. I own my house. And I let this little con artist steal from me. It's because they're very good at what they do. It's not because of anything that you've done wrong. Sometimes the scam goes on for so long that you may not know you've been getting stolen from. The woman in Canaan that we'll talk about, it was literally months after all these lines of credit were open that she found out that they'd all happened. But perhaps the most important one, and the one that I really have seen time and time again, is that older folks don't necessarily want to report because they're afraid that people will say, oh, you can't manage your money anymore. Maybe you need to go live in a nursing home. I mean, is that a valid fear that most people have? That at some point you're not going to be able to take care of yourself? I'll tell you, it's my fear. But what I want you to understand is that all of the police officers that work in this area have received some training in this, and they know not to jump to conclusions. They will investigate the crime the same as they would anybody else, and they're not going to make any assumptions about where you may be. Because dementia is a real thing, and we all know it. We've all known somebody with it. I know my grandmother, cancer took her before Alzheimer's did, which is a blessing. But at the same time, I know she was more and more afraid every time. And that's what these con artists are planning on. There's something called psychological abuse, where a caregiver might move around things in a person's home. So you go to get your checkbook out of that drawer that you've always kept it in, and that checkbook isn't there. And you say, "Where's my checkbook?" And the caregiver says, "You've never kept the checkbook in that drawer. You've always kept it over there on the desk." And you say to yourself, "I have never, ever put my checkbook in that desk." But now you start to question, like, am I losing it? And they do that on purpose in an effort to make you question yourself. So we want to talk about what this looks like when you file a complaint. Many of you have probably never had any reason to contact the police about a crime, never been a witness to a crime or anything like that. So we wanted to walk you through just so you knew what it looked like, so if you have to report, it's not something weird or different. And Chief, if I say anything different, Captain Burnham, I say anything different, you hop in, okay? So the report's filed with the police agency. The police officer that's assigned to your case, or a detective, depending on the department that you're going to, is going to take some information from you. They're going to ask you questions and make notes. Generally, in the beginning, it's just going to be some initial investigation. When it comes to crimes of elder abuse, the investigation might go further if you want to. You know, maybe you discover that a check's been written on your account, and then you find out it was your granddaughter. Maybe you don't want her to get arrested. The police aren't going to pursue it if you don't want to. They understand that. That's one of your rights as a victim. But they are going to take that initial information. And I'll explain to you why that's important in a little bit when we talk about the Keenan case too. The police will take all this information from you too, and they're going to have to start with determining if there's actually a crime that's been committed that they can investigate further too. It might be that the information that you've given them might be a civil law kind of action, but it might be a crime. That's part of what the police do. It's part of what they're trained to do, part of what the county attorney's office is designed to do as well. And then there can be criminal prosecution. Restitution of any money that was taken can be ordered as part of a sentence if there's a conviction. And that doesn't affect your ability to pursue civil judgments as well. And sometimes that comes up where you have a civil case, but it's also a crime that's been committed, and you can pursue both avenues. Doing one thing does not keep you from doing the other one, too. One of the things that con artists and thieves like to rely on is there's this myth out there that senior citizens make very bad witnesses. They think that these effects of age on memory, and we all know that the age does affect your memory. I'm not nearly as smart as I thought I was when I was 18, for example. But they're counting on you to not be able to supply enough information for the police to take those additional steps for investigation. And sometimes, as I said, you don't realize that you've been stolen from until weeks or months later. And then when you try to think back weeks or months later, sometimes it can be difficult. If I were to be asked, what presents did I get for Christmas this year, I would be hard-pressed to do it. And so would a lot of us. So it makes it difficult to keep details. So one of the recommendations that we make to all of you is that if you're doing some financial transaction, keep a journal. It's not a sign of a weakness that you keep track of this stuff, because does anybody here write checks without recording them in their checkbook ever? I don't think anybody does that. Okay, we won't tell anyone, it's all right. I do. Oh, terrible, terrible. But if you loan money, for example, I'll give you an example. So your grandson says, Grandpa, I really want to buy this motorcycle. I'll be very responsible. I've taken all the classes, but I need $500 more to pay for it. You're a good grandpa. You love your grandson. I'll loan you the $500. Let's document it right now. And you're going to tell me how you're going to pay me back, and I'll make notations about when you pay it. Not only are you keeping track of your own money more tightly, like you would your checkbook, but you're teaching your grandson about how to pay back loans as well. So it's not about being paranoid, it's not about being a bad grandparent, it's about teaching again. And then if something happens, if you find out, for example, that the $500 maybe went to buy some marijuana or something you wouldn't have approved of, You can go back and say, look, we documented, this is what this is for, you need to pay me back the money and be done with it. It's called theft by deception if somebody borrows money from you for a reason other than what they tell you. When you make a report to the police, you might be asked to fill out a statement. For a lot of people, they may think, oh my gosh, if I fill out this statement, I don't have to testify to court. And that's not quite the truth. The reason the police ask you to fill out the statement is that when you report a crime, it's true of anybody, your memory is fresh as then. And it might be months and months and months until prosecution happens. But when we get there, if you have to testify and you say, I don't remember any of these details anymore, well, you've written it all down in a statement, and you can look at that statement to refresh your memory. It's something we do literally every day in the courtroom. And as I said, you're a victim, you do have rights. We have a special statute called the Victims' Bill of Rights in the state of New Hampshire. These are some of the rights that you have if you are a victim of a crime. Specifically, you have a right to be treated with fairness and respect, that you be informed of the process. We have 2 women in our office that their whole job is to contact victims and tell them when the court dates are coming up, what the plea offers are that have been made. Do you like the plea offer that's been made? What do you want me to tell the prosecutor? And then you have a right to come to the sentencing and talk to the judge and tell the judge what you think about the plea offer. That's their whole job, is to make sure that victims are advised about what's going on. You have the right to be free of intimidation, which means that if you have to come to court, you don't have to look at that person until you actually go in court. We have special rooms we can sit you in and take other steps. One of the steps we took recently in a case with children witnesses was that I filed a motion with the court and said the defendant can't be within so many feet of these kids. And the court said, that seems very reasonable, just so the kids felt a little bit safer. You have a right to financial restitution, so any money stolen from you, you have a right to get that back. And restitution that's ordered through the criminal process can't go away in bankruptcy. That's a debt that follows them for the rest of their lives. And we actually have people that are still coming back in 20 years after their conviction, still having to pay back the restitution because they haven't taken care of it. The court doesn't let it go. And then you have the right to be present and heard during those sentencing hearings. And we actually have 2 judges on the bench that will not proceed until we have told the court either, here's Mr. Smith, the victim, he wants to say this, or that we say we've talked to Mr. Smith and here's what he thinks. They won't go forward until they know what the victim wants. We'll talk a little bit about cognitive issues and your mental health, sort of your ability to remember things. You know yourself better than anybody else, and as I said, they do engage in crazy-making behavior sometimes with moving the checkbook around, moving your keys around, things of that nature. If you are really concerned that maybe your memory isn't the way it should be, or that you're having some problems, your first stop should be with your doctor. Because with your doctor can look at all your medications. Sometimes medications interfere with each other. Sometimes they have side effects. Sometimes all it's going to take is changing your medication a little bit, and you may find that that kind of cloud that you have sometimes is going to be lifted a little bit. You can also do an honest self-assessment with yourself, and be honest with yourself, as scary as it might be. You might reach out to a third party. Do you have a best friend that's known you forever? They can tell you, yeah, things are getting worse, or no, it's your imagination. A pastor maybe, a counselor, an attorney. New Hampshire Legal Services just started an elder law project. Now, from what I understand, when you call there, you're generally not going to get an attorney on the phone right off the bat. They do have a waiting list, but you can certainly look to reach out to those kinds of people. And remember that the police are understanding. They're not going to jump to any conclusions. They're not going to be condescending. They know that sometimes people have cognitive issues, but just because you are over 65 doesn't mean you do have cognitive issues, that every person is to be treated as an individual. So when you're in doubt about what's going on, report it. Don't hesitate and say, well, geez, I'm not sure, I might have made a mistake. Don't hesitate, go to them, because the sooner you go to them, the sooner we can figure out what's actually happening, and maybe we're going to cut somebody off from stealing any more money from them. Identity theft is really big with elderly folks too. As I pointed out, you guys have excellent credit ratings compared to many younger people, and so that makes you a good target. It's anytime that somebody uses your personal identifying information, your name, your social security number, your date of birth, any of your bank account information, your credit card information, to commit fraud. And it's when they use it without your permission that it becomes identity fraud. It is the most rapidly growing crime in the country. I think my first year of prosecution in 2003, we had 8 cases in the office, and I don't think we can even count the number that we have right now. But you all have decades worth of this financial history that is so attractive to people. Especially now that the credit card companies have started limiting down the number of lines of credit they'll allow out. So there are different ways to steal your identity. The first one is mail fraud. They may send you the notice saying, you know, you've won the Australian lottery, for example. If you just send us your bank account information, we'll happily transfer you the funds from the Australian lottery. If you didn't enroll in the Australian lottery, you probably didn't win it. It's a scam to get your bank account information. Purse snatching and pickpocketing is actually one that people don't think about. You may have dropped your pocketbook. We've all dropped our purse, our wallet, whatever. That person giving it back to you, calling you up the next day saying, hey, I found this in the Hanford parking lot, may have recorded all of your information before giving you back your wallet. Grab and run thieves, store employees can use it. There was a woman down in the Home Depot in Lebanon who, when somebody would come in, she would try to sell them your Home Depot credit card. Just sign up for the Home Depot credit card. And she would take those applications, make a photocopy, and then go use it to make her own purchases online. So store employees can do it too. And of course, if you're carrying your PIN number with you and your debit card, they'll clean you out before you know what's happened. So don't do that. And I say that knowing that my PIN number is in my purse right now with my debit card, but it does make it much easier for them. Tax scams. This was one that came up about 6 months ago. They started sending out flyers indicating that if you were going to have trouble paying your income taxes this year, that they could help you, but you needed to give them your bank account number to set up, you know, a payment plan and all this kind of good stuff. And the United States government put a stop to that pretty quick because it was their money for the IRS that they were taking. Shoulder surfing. If anybody uses computer terminals in a public place like the library, be aware of who's standing behind you if you're doing your online banking there. Now, most people don't do that kind of banking at an unsecured website like that, but some people do. I put in the Lincoln Resort case, there was a woman who was making a reservation up here, and she was very hard of hearing, and the clerk, as opposed to, you know, turning up the volume or whatever else, began shouting her 16-digit credit card number back to her to make sure that he got it right. And of course, the busboy is standing there writing down all of the credit card information and went and made a bunch of purchases online because he had the credit card information, because he overheard it on the phone. It can happen just that quickly. There are a lot of online scams. My personal favorite is I just opened a new email account as part of the private practice that I'll be starting. And I've gotten about a dozen emails from various banks telling me that my account's been compromised. And what I need to do is send them back my information so they can guarantee that this is it. And I think it's hilarious because this email address has never been attached to any bank whatsoever. None of my, you know, and 6 of the 12 were banks I've never even banked at. But they're sending me these emails telling me my account's been compromised. And they'll do that because if they send out 200 emails, it's free. And if they can get just one person to respond, it's been a beneficial day for them. This is how the scams work. So how to protect yourself. If you're going online into a chat room or something of that nature, never use your full name. Pick out a nickname for yourself. Nani24, you know, Bill 6, whatever you want to be. Never share your address online. Never share your social security number online. Your login and password details, keep those very, very confidential. Don't use the same password either for if you've got multiple accounts, because then all it takes is to crack one password and put everything. Don't respond to calls, mails, or emails asking you to verify your personal information. If it's somebody you bank with or somebody you do business with, they have your personal information. They don't need you to double check it with them. Check your credit reports through each of the agencies. Check your bank accounts every month, and watch what's coming in your mail to make sure that it's all stuff that you recognize. So the Canaan theft that I talked about before is actually a little bit complicated, but it's a real case that I wanted to talk about so you can see how quickly this can happen. So Millie is a woman who had a stroke. Millie was convalescing in the hospital. The doctors told her that basically you're going to need to go to a nursing care facility for about 6 months, And then if everything works out, you can go home at that point in time. And Millie was on board with that. Her granddaughter said, Grandma, why would you ever go to a nursing home? I could take care of you. And Millie thought, well, yeah, I've heard nursing homes are really terrible. I think I will go live with her. And this is what happens. So Millie's daughter then moves in with the granddaughter and Millie. Millie is put in a bedroom that is in a part of the house where you have to go down about 4 stairs to get into her room. This meant that Millie could not get up the stairs to get into the main part of the house without assistance. So on those times that they didn't feel like dealing with her, they left her in her room, which, by the way, did not have a bathroom facility in it. And sometimes she would be left there for hours on end. She tells the officer, though, she ends up getting a letter out to her sister, who calls the police and says, I have been trying to call my sister for a week. Millie, could you please just go to her house and see if she's there? The officer went there, and Millie had managed to get her walker and finagle a way to get up those 4 steps. She was about 3 months into her recovery, but was not going to physical therapy. She talks to the officer and won't really talk to him very much, but says basically, I think they're stealing money from me. And I don't know what to do, and I don't really want anything to happen right now because I'm scared about what's going to happen to me. I'm not well, I don't want to go to a nursing home right now, and I don't want them to hate me. So the officer made some arrangements with the sister, and she ended up coming to the police station with her sister's help the next week and gave them some more information. She said that she'd been noticing some money missing from her checking account on the occasions where she could get her bank statements. That wasn't always a given. They weren't always available to her when she wanted them. But hers was the only name on that account. Her granddaughter had become her legal caretaker and got paid by the state of New Hampshire to take care of her grandmother while she was convalescing. In the meantime, she and her mother would yell at Millie, scream at her, refuse to help her, tell her she was selfish, all kinds of things. That's the psychological abuse that we see in elder cases sometimes. She wasn't allowed to go outside to get the mail. When she would ask her what came in the mail, she would be told that she's nosy and she needs to mind her own business. That they would tell her what she didn't know about what was coming in the mail. She began to see mail stack up on the counter. And occasionally, if she was allowed the main part of the house, she would notice that her name was on some of these letters. And they were from companies that she'd never done business with. And when she would say, well, what's that? She would again be told it's none of your business or it's junk mail. And you need to just go back to your room now. Then she began noticing those stacks of mail just got thrown away without being opened. And again, she asked about it and again was told, you're nosy, you're going back to your room now. She began noticing store packages coming in the mail and began noticing the granddaughter and the daughter coming home with big shopping bags from trips. Now, neither of them worked other than the stipend that Jessica got for being her grandmother's legal caretaker, and so Millie began to worry, where are they getting the money to do all this shopping from? Then it began that Millie was not allowed to go outside at all. When people would call for her, they were told she's sleeping, she's not feeling well, and then she would never get the messages that anybody had called. That's what prompted her sister to call the police, because she couldn't get her on the phone. When the police began their investigation, they discovered 40 credit cards opened in Millie's name. 2 of them were legitimate. She hadn't used them in many years, but there were 2 that were actually hers. The other 38 had all been opened by either the granddaughter or the daughter, maxed out and unpaid. So the total amount was $46,000 on those credit cards, but that's not counting the interest that began accruing when they stopped paying any payments on it. And they had never made any payments on any of those credit cards. In addition, police discovered utilities that were opened in Millie's name, cell phone accounts that were opened in Millie's name, and ultimately the granddaughter said it was all me. Not my mother, it was all me. I was the one that did it. She was convicted of felony identity fraud. She got a 5 to 10-year sentence in the state prison that was suspended for 10 years. And she had to pay back $15,000 worth of restitution. Now you're saying to yourselves, that's really nice, Melissa. That's a huge difference between 46 and the 15 she was ordered to pay. Well, the problem we had was that for many of these companies, it was cheaper to write the debt off than cooperate with the police investigation. And so that's ultimately what happened. And now you're saying to yourself, what a horrible woman she is. Wouldn't she go to prison for doing that to her grandmother? The answer's simple. Millie said, I'm not going in there and testifying against her. You know, I agree that what she did to me was terrible, but when I look at her, she's still 12 in pigtails. And I'm not putting her in jail. I won't do it. And I said, and we're not going to make you. Because remember, victims have rights in our state, and that's one of the rights she has. So she relocated to the state of Pennsylvania, so I did what I could do, and I called Elder Services down in Pennsylvania and said, hi, this is who just moved to your neighborhood. Just want to let you all know. So if she starts some sort of home health care business, you need to know. She did go on the registry in New Hampshire, so if she ever applied for a job working in a nursing home or working as a VNA or something like that, she would be disqualified because of her conviction. And I will say this for her, she has been making regular payments for the restitution that she owed. It took a little while, but we did get the credit card companies all agreed that Millie was not responsible for it, and those have all been wiped off of her record now. So, I want to talk a little bit about isolating behaviors too, so that if you see them in yourself or in somebody that's close to you, you know to be a little bit wary about what's going on in their life with the people around them. Because that's one of the most important things. Just like, I mean, if any of us saw a little kid smacked around right here in front of us, we wouldn't be quiet, right? We might even intervene. So they know that they have to do this behind closed doors, and elder abuse is the same way. They want to keep that older person away from as many people that can help as possible as they drain their bank accounts. So isolating behaviors start with convincing them that they can't live independently anymore. Now sometimes it may be that you can't live by yourself anymore. Sometimes you need help. And the question you have to ask yourself is this a genuine offer to help? You know, and I mentioned my mother-in-law before, and I'll do it again. My mother-in-law recently was a widow, and we invited her to come live with us. Not because she needs any assistance, but I just didn't want her to be alone wherever she was, you know. But she determined, you know what, no, I need to live independently, and that's what she's doing. Does it mean the door's closed to our house? No, she can always come back. But if we had been the kind of people that were kind of pushing on her, I would be suspicious of us. Because, you know, why would you want somebody to give up living independently? You know, question that. If somebody refuses to give rides to the store, rides to the bank, rides to church, if the senior actually needs it, or even better, not even helping them find a way to do that. One of the examples that they use in a national training is a woman whose daughter moved in to help her around after she had a stroke and stopped taking her to church. Well, why would you stop taking somebody to church? Because there are all those people in church that can help. That's isolating behaviors. If they don't allow the person to answer the phone or the door, again, not allowing any outside contact with the world, not allowing anybody to use the phone or the internet. And there's even, I heard about a case in Goffstown where the son kept turning the volume down on the phone, so that when his mother would try to use the phone, she thought she had gone deaf because the phone didn't work anymore. Changing doctors, lawyers, accountants, care providers very quickly and without the older person having any input into it. You got to ask, why are you changing these fundamental people in their lives? That's a very good question to ask, and starts being a little bit concerned about what's going on. Convincing somebody that they can't handle money, even though that person can handle their money. And that's a tricky one. You know, when my grandfather got older, they had to have that conversation about whether or not he should be driving anymore. And that's a really hard one to have for a lot of people. And ultimately, my grandfather agreed that he wasn't going to drive anymore. But it wasn't very easy. But it was based on the fact that he had a crash. If there isn't something like that, then why are you actually asking me to handle finances now? I can still keep my checkbook balanced. That's where that third person I talked about, that independent third party, might be a good one to help you judge what's really going on. If things like eyeglasses, hearing aids, your walker are moved on you routinely, you know, I can't drive without these. That would keep me stuck. Anybody with a hearing aid that can't hear without the hearing aid is stuck if they don't have that hearing aid. If you need a walker to move around and they put it on the other side of the room, you're stuck. Why would you do that to someone? You'd ask those questions. All right. Embezzlement comes in many forms. I wanted to alert you to something. There's actually a case from Coos County that I was asked to handle because of a conflict of interest. And the short story is Oscar had a stroke. He was recovering in the hospital, very close to death a couple of times, but he was bouncing back. And when he got to a point where he was feeling better, he said to us, he had a power of attorney. His son kicked in and did all the financial power of attorney and all of that while he was ill. And as he's feeling better, he says to the son, all right, I'm ready to get back on the horse. Let me see how my investments are doing. And the son had a lot of excuses about why the bank statements couldn't be brought to dad in the rehabilitation center. And it wasn't, and Oscar didn't want to really push it, but finally after 4 months of asking for his stuff and not getting it, he got his sister-in-law to give him a ride to his bank, and he found out that there were big amounts of money missing. And then he starts asking the son about it. The son had a bunch of excuses, and he waited another couple of months to report it to the police. And unfortunately, by the time that case got from Coos County down to Concord, back to our office, Oscar passed away. And there wasn't anything we could do about it, and the son benefited from a bad power of attorney. There are different kinds of power of attorney. One is for your financial affairs, one can be for your medical affairs. They're very different. And the big deal in New Hampshire is to, if you have a power of attorney, go through and read it. Read it with a fine-tooth comb if you can. Make sure that it's exactly what you want it to say. And if you don't understand the legal jargon in it, don't sign it. Talk to an attorney. Make sure that it is what you want. Credit card use, utility use. I want to talk to you about 2 quick cases. So I'll do the bottom one first. So granddaughter turns 18 and she says to grandma, geez, I can't get a cell phone because I don't have credit. I don't have any credit because I'm 18. I just turned 18. Grandma says, you know what? You can open this cell phone in my name and we'll add you on and we'll build your credit that way. And that's what happened. 10 years later, she's 28, has 3 kids, and needs some more money, and so she's opened a couple of credit cards with grandma's name and another cell phone. And grandma found out because she got a collection notice on one of the new cell phones. Now, the granddaughter had paid everything on the first phone that she agreed, under grandma's name, but it's those other ones that she stopped paying on. That was identity fraud. Not for the first one, because grandma did authorize her to use her name, but for all the other ones. That was identity fraud. There's a gentleman who lived in Enfield who was blind, and as a result, to keep track of things, he would always keep his credit card under the same placemat on the table, because he knew that's where he'd find it. When the new credit card came in, it had expired, and so his caregiver, who was supposed to come in and clean the house, took the old one out of the trash, because he hadn't shredded it, replaced the old one under the placemat, and took the new one off and began using it at gas stations and grocery stores and whatever else. So every time he'd go to reach for it and feel if his credit card was there, of course it was, but he didn't know it was the expired one. Now, luckily for him, he actually had, I think TriCap worked with him, and they did his accounting for him, with bank statements and stuff, and they caught it the first month. And she was convicted of multiple counts of theft against an elderly person. And so she ended up doing about 6 months in jail, and she too has been repaying all of her restitution. So loaning money, there's actually a case that I prosecuted a number of years ago from Woodstock. That's kind of one of the reasons that we need this new statute that I talked about at the beginning. But basically, in thinking about loaning money, regardless of the amount, regardless of who the person is, really don't loan out money that you can't afford to miss. If loaning out $1,000 and now you're not going to get paid back, that $1,000 is going to hurt you financially, don't take the risk. Even if your grandson looks at you with those big puppy dog eyes and says, please, Graham, can I borrow it? Don't do it. It's not worth the risk to you. Banks wouldn't make that kind of risk. You should make that kind of risk. Ask questions about what that money is going to be used for. Think about the last time you had to apply for a car loan or even a mortgage. They asked you a ton of questions. You had to fill out a lot of paperwork. Why should you be any different loaning out your money? Ask questions, set up a payment schedule right away. And as I said, put it all in writing. Have a neutral person witness it, not your son, not your daughter, somebody random, to be a neutral witness to it. The internet scams, the Nigerian prince, please just send me some money and I can access my American bank account and I can pay you back. No, that's not how that works. Australian lottery, no. Bogus charities, be careful of, because there is the New Hampshire Benevolent Police Administrators Association. but only on the phone. They don't really, it doesn't exist. It's not a real charity, but they have called me and asked me to give them money. So any legitimate charity is not going to have problems with mailing you something directly. If you ask them, you know what, I would love to donate to your cause, can you send me more information? And they say, you know it's not a real charity. Real charities have no problem doing that. Craigslist, be careful on Craigslist. There are many fraudulent sellers. We have had 3 cases so far where people have bought tractors or custom cars on Craigslist, only to find out that the item never existed and they'd already sent money off by wire transfer. Just delete emails that you get with those kinds of things. Don't bother reading them. Don't bother reporting them because most of them originate outside of the United States and there's nothing we can do about it for law enforcement, so just get rid of them. Double check all your websites for accuracy. There's a community group out of Chicago that I was part of for a training I did that I typed in what I thought was their address and I was taken to a pornographic site because one letter was different. So this happens all the time. Double check all of your websites because it might be Bank of America spelled with an E, B-A-N-K-E of America, and that may be a completely fraudulent site that they've bought just for the sole purpose of pulling money out. And if you're going to be sending any money over the internet, use something like PayPal, which is a third-party transfer. You give PayPal the money and they hold on to it until you say, yeah, pass it along. Kind of like an escrow. Phone solicitations. Chief talked about your grandson's in trouble in Canada. There's a lady in Canaan that's out about $2,500 because she thought her granddaughter needed bail money. Fake charities the same way. Protecting yourself. Verify. It's okay to call your son or daughter and say, hey, is little Timmy really in Canada? Because the lady in Canaan found out after she called her son, no, he's at college where he's supposed to be. Yeah, I just talked to him. That's where he is. Ask for a callback number. Make note of any number that pops up on your caller ID. That'll help the police track back where it is. And legitimate charities have no problem mailing you written materials. Trash thieves shred your important information. That's the best I can tell you about that. Dating scams. This is the last one. And this, again, there was a lady in the Enfield, Grafton area who fell prey to this. If anybody decides to go for online dating, Match.com or anything like that, just be aware that that person you're talking to may not be the picture that you see on the internet. If they start having problems with agreeing to meet in real life, MIRL, that's probably a flag. If they need you to send them money, that's probably a flag. She was out a couple of $1,000s, and this guy was actually pretty sophisticated. He was an architect. He gave her his website. There's this beautiful architect's website. You know, it looked like he had customers and all this stuff. Well, nobody verifies any of that stuff. It was all completely fake. And he had about 6 women that were sending him a couple of $1,000s every couple of months because he needed a plane ticket out to see you. All my money's tied up in investment. If you can just send me a couple of grand for the plane ticket, I'll be there to see you and sweep you off your feet and ooh la la. And they would do it, and then he'd say, oh, I have to go to London for a business issue. I'm so sorry. You know, maybe next month we can meet. And it goes on until you say stop. So be always kind of skeptical of all of those things. And in summary, remember that you are targets. That's unfortunate. I'm really sorry. But at least now you know your targets, right? You can protect yourselves. There are steps you can take. If you're a victim, do not hesitate to contact the police department. Even if you're pretty sure there's nothing they can do, call them anyway. You'd be surprised what they can do. And your rights as a victim will always be respected. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Yes?
Isn't it going to be that our Social Security checks will all go to the bank and you don't get any in the mail? Because that's something?
They are moving in that direction. I don't know if are they completely in that direction yet? I know they were still. They are now.
Majority of them
So
are.
that skips over a lot of that.
Direct deposit, yeah.
That direct deposit?
Yeah, direct deposit.
I've had that for
Direct
years.
deposit is really the way to go on anything you're getting, whether it's Social Security checks or a pension or annuities from an investment, something like that. That's the best way because then you never have to worry about where it is in the meantime.
You talked a little bit about the online registry of one of the defendants in the criminal case.
Sure.
If someone is hiring a private caregiver, like not through an agency, can you talk about how they can access that?
Sure, if you go to the Department of Health and Human Services site, and you're going to want to go to Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services, they have information, and the registry is online about people that have been convicted of crimes against elderly people. If you don't like the internet or don't have access to the internet, you can call your local Bureau of Adult and Elderly Services office, and they can help you with that too, so that you can do a double check. But it should flag pretty quickly. Now, they're only on there for a certain amount of time. So if this happened 20 years ago, they're probably not on the registry anymore, but this would be more active. I think they're on for 7 years, I think.
How good is a family trust?
Depends. You want the lawyer answer? It depends. It really does depend on the language with trusts and things of that nature. You know, if you have a good trust attorney that drafted it, it's probably going to do exactly what you wanted it to do and intended for it to do. You know, I don't want to know who drafted it or anything like that, but if you have any concerns about it, you know, nothing says you can't go get a second opinion. If you can get a second opinion from a doctor, your legal affairs are just as important, and getting a second opinion might be if you have some concerns about it. Family trusts are only as good as the language that's used, you know, kind of like anything, quite honestly. So, great lawyer answer, right? Yes, ma'am.
Are the home health agencies, do they investigate all the people that go into the homes now?
The ones that are licensed, absolutely, they have to, yeah.
They didn't used to, that's what happened.
Right. Yeah, and so now all the agencies are doing that because they become very aware that this is a long-going problem, yeah. And as far as I know, all of the licensed agencies run a check through and grill them and all that kind of good stuff. It's, you know, kind of the unofficial unlicensed agencies or the solo practitioners that, you know, might have some other issues going on.
There's a lot of people, you know, that go out into the home.
There's actually a move toward that, you know, and from a law enforcement standpoint, that's wonderful that people can live in their homes longer, but it freaks us out because what is going on there? We want to make sure everybody's safe in that house, you know, so that's why I gave you guys some examples of the isolating behaviors too. Is there somebody else that has a question?
If you do make out any kind of legal paperwork, should you update it after, say, 20 years, 10 years?
If there are changes that you would like to make, you know,
Well, even if there are changes?
you want to at least review it. I would say review it every couple of years, make sure it's still where you want to be. You know, if there aren't any changes, good, but there's nothing that says you have to change it, no, anything like that. I mean, a will that was written 20 years ago is just as enforceable as long as it was validly executed and all that kind of good stuff as one written yesterday. So except, again, just to make sure that it reflects what you want. You know, I'll give you an example from my own history. My grandparents wrote out their wills at a time where my parents didn't own their own home. So their will gave my parents their home. And then nobody bothered to update it after my parents owned their own home and everything else. And so my dad and his siblings kind of worked it out amongst themselves, but that was a great example of nobody going back and updating things, you
So the
know.
language doesn't vary, it stays.
That's correct.
As soon as they're ready for you, you guys can get some.
Yes.
Scams from Canada, is there anything that's improved with trying to get any money back from that?
The question is scams from Canada. Has anything improved about getting money back from them? Yes and no. You know, it
Good
comes to...
lawyer answer.
I'm sorry?
Good lawyer answer.
Yes or no?
That's why I went to school, so I can get lawyer answers. I can say that we have not had good luck, but I know that other counties have. And generally, it's like a lot of things whenever we involve the federal government. The federal government here doesn't want to prosecute small things. They want the big things, and they actually have thresholds before we refer a case to them, potentially. And so, too, the Canadian government, if it's a large amount of money, they are more cooperative than small amounts because from their point of view, I think it's a cost savings, you know, when it comes down to it. So the $2,500 that we saw across the border in the Canaan case, there wasn't much they could do about it.
25,000?
2,500 that was...
What about 25,000?
Potentially. And, you know, part of the problem with some of these scams, too, is that, you know, for my grandson's in jail in Canada one, they're giving you a number to wire the money to, and 9 times out of 10, it's a convenience store like it is here. And then the question is, do they have security cameras? Do they not? Did we catch it in time, or was it on one of those repeating loops? You know, it's catch as catch can. It depends so much on the circumstances, but I like to think that it's better now because I think they're recognizing the same dangers to their community that we are.
Thank you.
That 1-800 number on the telephones, that where you put it in, do not call the solicitors?
Yep,
Now, that doesn't work after a power failure, you have to do it again.
really?
Yes, that's right. As soon as you have a power glitch, it goes out, you have to do it again. And we're getting dozens, you know? Every time you do anything on the internet, you get 600 calls from it.
Absolutely. I know, and that's,
800 number, but then I found out you have to put it right back in, and it doesn't work for 30 days.
no, and the best thing you can do is, I know it's annoying, but the more you hang up on them, the less,
Oh, I hang up all the time.
oh, absolutely. And in time, they will simply stop because you're not worth them trying anymore, you know?
Even caller ID, I pick it up, put on and off, automatically.
You could also do what my neighbors did once, which was tell them that he'd be happy to talk to them as soon as he got done with bankruptcy court. And then that stopped all the calls to his house.
What was that about bankruptcy?
He said, I'll be happy to talk to you, but I gotta get to bankruptcy court right now.
Oh, that sounds like a good one. I'll use that.
Does anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you all very much. I'm really glad I got to be here. Thanks.